One evening, children were playing happily in the narrow street of their neighborhood. Laughter filled the air as they ran, shouted, and chased each other without a care in the world. Among them was a quiet boy named Ian, who suddenly stopped playing. While the others continued, he stood still, staring into the distance. At first, no one noticed. But when one of his friends called his name, Ian slowly turned his head. There was something strange about his eyes. They looked empty, almost lifeless. The children felt uneasy, but they thought he was just joking. Without saying a word, Ian began walking toward his house. When he reached home, his mother immediately sensed something was wrong. He didn't greet her like usual. Instead, he walked past her silently and went straight to his room. His behavior made her uncomfortable, but she tried to ignore it. That night, the house grew quiet. Suddenly, faint whispering sounds began coming from Ian's room. His parents looked at each other in confusion. He was supposed to be alone. The whispers grew clearer, as if more than one voice was speaking softly in the dark. Worried, his father slowly walked toward the room and opened the door. Ian was sitting in the corner, completely still. He was smiling, but it wasn't a normal smile. When his father called his name, Ian lifted his head slowly. Then, in a voice that did not sound like his own, he said, "I'm not leaving anymore." And in that moment, they realized their child was not alone anymore. Fearful face. After hearing those chilling words, Ian's parents stood frozen in fear. The voice they heard was not their child's. It was deeper, colder, and filled with something unknown. His mother slowly stepped back, her heart racing. "Ian, what are you saying?" she whispered. But Ian didn't respond. Instead, he kept smiling, his eyes fixed on them without blinking. The room suddenly felt colder, and the air grew heavy, making it hard to breathe. Then, softly, the whispers returned. This time, they weren't coming from outside. They were coming from him. Multiple voices seemed to echo from Ian at once, overlapping and unclear. His father quickly pulled his mother back and tried to turn on the lights, but they started flickering violently. "Ian, stop this," his father shouted. Suddenly, Ian stood up. But the way he moved was wrong, slow, stiff, unnatural, like something else was controlling his body. His mother began to cry. "This isn't my son." Ian took a step forward. Then another. The whispers grew louder, filling the entire room. It felt like the walls themselves were repeating them. Then Ian spoke again. "You let me in?" His parents looked at each other in confusion and terror. "What do you mean?" his father asked, his voice shaking. Ian tilted his head slightly, and his smile widened. "When he was alone, I followed him." The lights suddenly went out. Darkness filled the room. And in that silence, they heard footsteps moving closer. Very close. Too close. Then, right beside them, a whisper echoed clearly. "Now, I'm not alone anymore." Fearful face. The whisper faded, but the fear stayed. Ian's parents stood frozen in the darkness, unable to move or speak. Their hearts were pounding as the room fell completely silent again. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then suddenly, the lights turned back on. Ian was gone. The corner where he had been sitting was now empty. "Ian," his mother called out, her voice shaking. "Where are you?" No answer. His father quickly searched the room, under the bed, behind the door, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Then they heard it. A soft giggle, coming from the hallway. Slowly, they stepped out of the room and looked into the dark corridor. At the far end, they saw Ian standing there, his back facing them. "Ian, come here," his father said carefully. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, very slowly, Ian turned around. His face was pale. His eyes were darker than before, and that same unnatural smile spread across his lips again. But this time, something was different. Behind him on the wall, there was another shadow. It wasn't his. It moved on its own. His mother gasped, stepping back in horror. "Ian, please," she whispered. Ian tilted his head slightly, and in that same chilling, unfamiliar voice, he said, "You can see it now, can't you?" The shadow behind him stretched wider, taller, darker. Then it slowly began to move forward, separating from him, and coming toward them. Fearful face. Ian stood motionless in the hallway, his eyes fixed on his parents. The house felt completely silent now, as if even the air was afraid to move. But behind that silence, something far more terrifying was happening. The shadow on the wall behind Ian began to grow, slowly at first, then rapidly, stretching in unnatural shapes. It was no longer just a shadow. It looked alive, as if it had its own will. Ian, come away from there, his mother cried, stepping forward. But Ian didn't move. His smile only grew wider. Then, in that same strange voice, he spoke again. It's too late now. The lights in the hallway flickered violently, casting broken flashes of light and darkness. In those flashes, the shadow seemed to detach itself slightly from the wall, like it was trying to step out. His father grabbed his mother's hand. We need to get out of here. But the front door suddenly slammed shut on its own. Fearful face. A loud bang echoed through the house. The shadow now fully separated from the wall and began to take shape, tall, dark, and shifting like smoke. It moved slowly toward them, filling the hallway with an unbearable cold. Ian turned his head slightly and whispered, "He followed me home." His mother shook her head in horror. "What did you bring into this house?" Ian didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside. And now they could see it clearly. The shadow wasn't just behind him anymore. It was inside him. The room darkened completely, and for a moment, everything went silent again. Then, from the darkness, a voice echoed, not Ian's anymore. "Now, we all stay together." Fearful face. The house was no longer the same. The hallway was filled with a deep, unnatural darkness, as if the light itself had been swallowed. Ian's parents stood frozen, unable to understand what was real anymore. The voice that had spoken just moments ago still echoed in their minds. "Now, we all stay together." Ian stood silently in front of them, but he was not the same child anymore. His face looked calm, yet empty, like something inside him had completely taken over. The shadow behind him had now spread across the walls, slowly crawling like a living creature. "Ian, please," his mother whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "Come back to us." For a brief second, Ian's expression changed. It almost looked like he was struggling inside, as if something was fighting within him. But then he tilted his head slightly and smiled again. The shadow suddenly moved faster. It wrapped around the hallway walls, creeping closer to both parents. The temperature dropped sharply, and their breath became visible in the cold air. His father stepped forward, trying to protect his family. "Whatever you are, leave him alone." At that moment, Ian's voice and the shadow's voice merged together, echoing through the house. "He opened the door for me." The lights exploded with a sudden flash and went out completely. Darkness swallowed everything. In that pitch-black silence, only slow footsteps could be heard, moving closer, closer, and closer. Then, right in front of them, a whisper came from every direction at once. "Now there is no Ian, only us." Fearful face. The darkness inside the house felt heavier than ever, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Ian's parents could no longer see anything clearly, only shapes moving in the blackness and the sound of slow, crawling whispers all around them. "Ian," his mother cried out desperately, "please answer me." But there was no response. Instead, a soft laugh echoed through the house. It was not human. It was layered, distorted, like multiple voices laughing at once. Then suddenly, a faint light flickered in the distance of the hallway. Out of the darkness, Ian appeared again. But he was not alone. Behind him stood a tall, shifting shadow figure, barely holding a human shape. It loomed over him like it was controlling his every movement. Ian walked slowly, step by step, as if something else was guiding him forward. His father grabbed a wooden object from nearby, trying to stay strong. "Stay away from him," he shouted. But Ian stopped. He tilted his head, and for a split second, his eyes flickered back to normal. "Help me," he whispered faintly. His mother took a step forward, tears running down her face. "Ian, I'm here, fight it." The shadow behind him suddenly reacted. It twisted violently, tightening around Ian like a cage. His face changed again, returning to that empty, cold expression. The voice returned, deeper than before. "He is no longer yours." The walls began to shake slightly. The shadow spread across the ceiling now, covering the entire house like a dark cloud. Ian raised his hand slowly and pointed toward his parents. And in that moment, everything went completely silent again. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Then, in a whisper that came from everywhere at once, "It chooses who stays next." Fearful face. The house was completely silent now. No whispers, no movement, no light, only darkness. Ian's parents stood in the middle of the hallway, unable to understand what had just happened. The air felt dead, as if time itself had stopped inside the house. Then, slowly, a faint sound returned. Footsteps. But this time, there were more than one. From the darkness of the hallway, shapes began to appear. Not clearly at first, just outlines. Then slowly, they became visible. Ian was standing there again. But he was not alone. Behind him stood dark figures, standing perfectly still, as if they had always been part of the house. His mother whispered, shaking, "Ian." Ian slowly lifted his head. His eyes were now completely empty. And then, in a calm, broken voice, he spoke. "There are others now." The walls of the house began to crack slightly, and faint shadows appeared all around them. Not just one, but many. The house was no longer just a home. It had become something else. A place that collected them, one by one. His father stepped back in fear. "We are leaving this place right now." But when he turned, the front door was gone. There was only a wall. Ian took one step forward, then another. And with every step, the shadows grew stronger. His voice echoed again, but now it was no longer his. "No one leaves after I enter." The lights briefly flickered back for a second. And in that single moment, Ian's face looked human again. He whispered softly, "Run." Then everything went dark forever. And the house remained silent, waiting for the next one. Fearful face.